President. Please be seated. The court is now in session. Before the Chamber gives the floor to the defense teams for the accused, the Chamber would like first to hand over the floor to Judge Laverne to finish a few points with the witness. You may proceed first, Deputy Co-Prosecutor. Please wait, Judge Laverne.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the information of the parties. And in order that the record of these proceedings may reflect this, I would like to point out two things. In the document titled the Black Book, or the Black Paper, as it's translated in English, that is document E3/262, contains two photographs of Vietnamese prisoners. One, according to the label under the photograph, corresponds to that of Colonel Nguyen Van Chien and Nguyen Van Chin. The ERN in English is 0008255-3, and in French 00284606. These photographs These photographs appear to show major similarities with the photographs of Vietnamese prisoners, or the images of Vietnamese prisoners making statements in the video footage we saw this morning, titled Cambodia, Cambodia. And the names of the two persons appear on the S21 list established by the co-investigating judges. The Chamber observes that the date of publication of the Black Paper is September 1978. The second remark is as follows. On several occasions during the past hearings, witness Kangek Eve has referred to a signature or a name featuring on a document that was shown to witness Lac Mien, and which was confirmed by Lac Mien as his name and signature. The Chamber recalls that an incident involving the name of Lac Mien occurred at the hearing of 25th of April 2016 during a testimony during this trial. The Chamber had requested the Interpretation and Translation Unit to correct the document E3/2469. This issue was the subject of a trial chamber memorandum, and it is document E414. And the Chamber, in view of the explanations provided by the ITU, decided not to make the correction, considering that the name appearing on the document ought to be read as Takmin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to make a few brief observations regarding the chart of the daily prisoner list chart that Judge Laverne circulated, the trial chamber circulated. Should any of the parties be using this list, just a couple of quick points to make. First, if you are looking at what they call the daily control lists for a particular date, and you're looking for the corresponding execution list of the prisoners who were taken out, you need to look at the day before. We've gone through this and we've been able to match. I went through for the large executions that are in the chart that was used. And in each case, I was able to match them to an execution list, but it's an execution list from the day before. So when I know Judge Laverne asked a number of questions about the dates of execution lists and why they didn't appear in the daily control list. If you're looking at an execution list for, let's say, the 10th of December, those execution lists are usually not dated until the following day, and it wasn't until the following day that it is entered into the totals of the prisoners. So to the extent you're trying to match up those two different sets of documents, you need to follow that process. Second point, and I think Judge Laverne had asked about the daily control list for 30 June 1977, document E3-9984, and specifically it's referenced there to approximately 40 prisoners having been taken out that day. Pursuant to what I've just indicated, if you want to find the corresponding execution list, you need to look to the day before, to the 29th of June. And I think what the parties should understand, and what may be of interest to the bench, there are actually two execution lists for the 29th of June 1977. One has 40 prisoners that corresponds to the 40 prisoners who are in the daily control list for the 30th of June. That document with the matching 40 prisoners, E3/2285, and the English ERN is 873496 through 99499. This is one of these. E3-2285 contains multiple separate execution lists. There is a second execution list for that same day that has 78 or 76 or 78 prisoners that is not reflected in the daily control list. And the difference between these two lists, the 40 prisoners who are recorded are prisoners identified as from Presar, from Brother Huisre's unit, who have dates of being sent from Presar first to the prison, to S21 prison, and then a few days later being sent out for execution. The other list, which is not reflected in the totals, has no indication of the prisoners going to S21 first before being sent for execution. In other words, it's consistent with a practice the witnesses testified to of prisoners sometimes being sent directly from Presar to Chang'ek. And in that case, it appears they would not reflect in the totals for the prison in Phnom Penh at the Tuolslang prison. So that's a second observation relating to the numbers and how the daily control list corresponds to the execution lists. Third and last observation, Judge Laverne had raised the issue of, in his chart, there is a gap. He pointed out that in the daily...
sorry to interrupt, but why is the prosecution arguing a case here already for 15 minutes?
Mr. President, this is pertinent to information that was presented in court yesterday. If the defense is going to question these witnesses on these documents, I'd like this to be part of the record so they're on notice of this. If I may, I can briefly finish. Judge Laverne raised the issue of the prisoners dropping from a total of 1,700 on the 15th of October to a total of 953 on the 24th of October, 1977. I simply want the record to reflect there are several large execution orders between those two dates, which for the record you will find all of these are in E3/2285 at English 00873-281 through 320 is an execution list for 418 people during that gap. And a few days later, the 18th of October, you'll find one for 179 people. So I simply want the record to reflect this, as I think it is significant in terms of understanding the chart that Judge Laverne was using yesterday.
President, thank you. The floor is now given to the defense teams for the accused, starting first from Nunche defense team to put questions to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors, Counsel. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. Before I start, Mr. President, just very, very briefly, a roadmap for the examination of the defense, by the defense. If our calculation is correct, in the light of the extra time the prosecution has received, in the light of the submissions by the civil parties after the break, it is our understanding and calculation that we have all 4 days next week. So we will ask our questions all the way until the very last session on Thursday. That's one. Secondly, just for your information, we're using the same division as the prosecution and civil parties. I will do the examination today and Monday and Tuesday. Then the accused and pound defense team will start on Wednesday. Maybe we'll go into the Thursday, and then we will finish our questioning. Just so that you are aware of this, Mr. President. Having said that, good afternoon again, Mr. Witness. In the light of the fact that today I only have one session, and also in the light of the questions by Judge Laverne, let me start with a subject that originally I wanted not to start with, but I will do that now. And actually that builds up on something you said last week or sometime this week. You were answering questions from the prosecution in relation to methods of interrogation used at S21, and one of them was the use of plastic bags over the head of prisoners. And you said that this was a technique that you had learned through Von Vet from the Vietnamese. Let me follow up on this and start with something you said 7 years ago in your own trial. Mr. President, that is E3/5794, the transcript of 28th of April 2009. And this is what you said, Mr. Witness, and I quote, "The person who taught me how to torture was the Lon Nol regime. That is number one. The inspector at PJ, he beat the Khmer Rouge prisoners, and I knew, even if the Sihanouk police at Tulkork did not beat me up, but the Inspector Chin Iv and Inspector Chu Hum beat the Khmer Rouge. That happened in the Lon Nol regime, and that Lon Nol regime taught me. And second, it's the French regime. The French tortured members of the Vietnamese Labour Party. And a bit further, you said, again, about the beating up. I learned it from the Lon Nol and the French inspectors. Can you, Mr. Witness, expand a bit on this? What exactly did you mean when you said that? How were these methods taught to you by the French and by the Lon Nol officials?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to shed light on the statement quoted by the Defense Counsel. The first point that I would like to make clarification is about the methods instructed by Brother Won. There were two methods instructed by Von Wade. He instructed me to observe the pulse at the neck of the prisoners. If the pulse was bumping so quickly, that means the prisoner was a spy. And the second method was about the suffocation, putting a plastic bag on to the prisoner's head, and after the prisoner was unconscious, and after that he or she recovered, the interrogation would continue. When I was at M13, I instructed my staff members about the two methods, but my staff member did not use those two methods, although I told them about the two methods. Brother Von Wade did not instruct us in the study session, but he told me about the two methods of interrogation. Concerning PG, in fact, before that, I had been detained at Preso, the military prison. During my interrogation, the time when I was interrogated, I was not bitten by the inspector, but when I was detained at PJ, the inspector Chet Il of Lon Nol official beat me up. And the method that they used at the time, they pour water onto the kroma or scarf which covered the prisoner's mouth. That was the method that they used as well. And another method is the electrocution. That electrocution method was preferred by Nad. And Nad preferred the electrocution by using the manual dial telephone. And later on, there was another method of interrogation. The picture with human body and dog head. And I asked the prisoners to pay a homage to that picture. So I was not instructed, or I was not trained on any interrogation methods, but the methods were permitted. However, as I said, in principle, if a guard beat up the important prisoner to death, that guard would be detained instead of the prisoner. And another point.
Mr. Witness, sorry to interrupt you, but I don't have that much time, although it's 3 days. I would appreciate it if you do not repeat the things that you've said already in court, and try to focus on the questions that I ask you. Very specifically, you said the beating up, I learned it from Lonol and the French inspectors. What was it that you learned from French inspectors?
Witness. Counsel, do you have the exact excerpt that you have in the transcript? If so, please show it to me. So please show me the exact word that I used in the transcript.
Well, I only have the English version, and it says at around 1438, and about the beating up, I learned it from the Lonol and the French inspectors, the police, end of quote. So, again, my question is, what did you learn from the French inspectors, or what did you mean with that?
I was telling you and explain you on the particular point that you asked to avoid any confusion. I did not learn any methods from the inspector or from anyone. That methods were used thanks to the experience that I had.
I will get back to the French issue, but before I do that, let me refer to something you said on the 9th of June, just before 1409. You talked about interrogation methods and intelligence gathering, and you mentioned a name. I think the name that we can find in the English transcript and the French transcript are not the actual person that you mean. In English, Mr. President, the witness refers to Alain de Louvre, and in the French transcript, he refers to a book, un autre livre de Alain Gueloc. When you mentioned that name, Mr. Witness, did you in fact refer to someone called Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA, who wrote the book The Craft of Intelligence, of which you had a French translation while you were at M13, called a book called Technique de Renseignement? And Mr. President, for the record, you can find that in E3/347, English ERN 00002511, French 00160932, Khmer 00160896. So is that the book that you refer to, the book of CIA Director Allen Dulles?
English interpreter. Technique de renseignement is intelligence gathering techniques.
Indeed, and in the document it is translated as The Craft of Intelligence. I think that's the original title. Dulles, D-U-L-L-E-S, Allen Dulles. Is that the person you referred to in your testimony a few days ago?
Thank you, Counsel. I am referring to Allen Dulles, and I do not know whether the French version and English version of the transcript are the same. And the title of the book is Intelligence Gathering Technique or Graft of Intelligence. And to my recollection, it was the first director of CIA. His name was Alan Dulles.
And you use that book as inspiration for your intelligence gathering activities at M13 and subsequently at S21?
Thank you, Counsel. At M13, before that, I did not have any books on techniques. What was my experience is the techniques used by Bao Gong. And I based on evidence. That is the first point. Later on, when I went to work at S21, I found a book named Graft. I found two books, Graft of Intelligence by Alan Dulles, and I sent a book to the upper echelon, and my French at the time was not so good, and because of my busy time, I did not read the whole book, and I did not use the techniques from Alan Dulles. The book that he wrote was about the techniques in general, in terms of intelligence.
Let me get back now to the matter of methods, interrogation methods used by the French. And let me read to you an excerpt from a book from someone who has been called to testify here as an expert. His name is Philip Short. I believe that in your trial, the 9th of April 2012, you were asked whether you had read his book as part of the case file, and I think you said that you hadn't. So let me now read to you an excerpt, and then I will ask for your reaction in the light of what I asked you before. Mr. President, E3/9, English ERN 003-96572. It's page 364 of the book. French ERN 00639933. There is no Khmer translation, but because of there are some difficult words, I have given the excerpt before to the translation unit, so hopefully they can read along. Mr. Witness, Philip Short is putting S21 in a wider context and is comparing it to other institutions. And he says that much about S21 is, as he calls it, depressingly familiar. He says, and I quote the following: "Democratic governments have also gone down that road. The French army in Algeria set up torture centers where conscripts martyrized suspected fedayeen and then killed them to maintain secrecy. Exactly the same justification as was used in democratic Kampuchea. 5,000 Algerian prisoners were killed in this way in one interrogation center alone. In the country as a whole, the number of such deaths probably exceeded the 15 to 20,000 who died in S21. The factors that led young Roman Catholic Frenchmen to violate every principle of justice and humanity they had learned since childhood were not essentially different from those that governed the conduct of S-21 guards. And a bit further, and that's the final and second quote, it may be argued that for Khmers it was easier. Their religion cultivates indifference. However, S-21 had French carceral antecedents. The shackles used in its cell were inherited from French colonial times. The torture that the Khmer Rouge called stuffing prisoners with water had been introduced to Indochina by the French army, which called it la baignoire, the bathtub, and used it on the Viet Minh in the early 1950s. End of quote. It was a long quote. Mr. Witness, can you give a reaction to that excerpt from Philip Short in his book?
During the proceedings of my trial in case 001, Philip Short did not come here to testify as an expert. And this is the first time that I heard about that statement from you. And that is his personal opinion based on his personal research. For example, in terms of handcuff, I did not see Mr. Philip Short's document from the French colony. The cuffs and shackles were made based on the instructions from the upper echelon at M13. The same shackles and cuffs were also used at the Kuk Thum, or the main prison. I was detained there from 5th January 1968 to the 3rd of April 1970 when I was released. And while I was there, I saw those shackles and cuffs. And when I was released, I actually made a similar copy to that. I did not read any instruction from the French colony regarding how to make the cuffs or shackles. No, not at all. And frankly speaking, what I tell you is what happened from my personal experience. I saw them, I made them. I have my own ideology. I was educated and respected by two aspects, that is based on the principles and practice of Bao Gong. That is, every of his judgment was based on evidence. And another Chinese movie that motivated me was a Chinese counter-spy movie. And I actually observe what happened in the movie and actually relate similar instructions to my lower subordinate. So I had my own principle based on my personal observations, and I put them into practice.
Let me see if I can try it differently. You've discussed at length interrogation methods, techniques. Is there anything that you applied at S21 which is not originating somehow from either the French or the Lon Nol military or officials?
Allow me to say that it does not mean that I did not learn anything from anyone. I learned some lessons, but they never get into my personal way of thinking. Allow me to quote from Baza about the demise of a political regime, and subsequently the government also got into demise, but the police force remained. And for that reason, the techniques employed by the police also remained in order to find the truth. For that reason, I tried my best, based on the situation at the time, to find evidence, although it would not be as precise as those evidence in the case of Pao Kong, but I tried my best to gather evidence so that not everyone could be implicated if it was not done properly.
Very well, Mr. Witness. I will go back to this subject of interrogation techniques, which are called, for your information, enhanced interrogation techniques presently by a former U.S. administration. But having said that, let me move to my next subject, Mr. Witness, and that is an issue that we have been discussing already quite a bit, and that is the subject of what is your knowledge from the time you were working in DK, and what is the knowledge that you have subsequently acquired after 79, and most specifically after having read extensively the case file. Let me start by reading something you said in your testimony in this case, but in 2012. That is transcript E1/51.1, 20 March 2012 at about 11:28. You were asked questions about general questions about situation in DK, and then you said literally the following: however, if you really want me to only talk about what I knew back then, I'm afraid I may not have anything to tell the world about this, because I was confined to S21 in particular. End of quote. Do you remember saying this, and what exactly did you mean when you said that?
You asked me just by relying on a portion of an excerpt. It would be better if you could provide me a fuller excerpt so that I am able to respond to your question. You only pick one point to put to me, and it is not possible for me to respond. I apologize for that.
Well, let me give you a very concrete example, and maybe by giving you that example, you would understand what I mean. It is actually something you said only a few days ago. You were asked a question by the prosecution about a saying that might have been used in DK. It is better to arrest 10 innocent people by mistake than to free a single guilty person. And then you answered on the 9th of June 2016 at 14:13 hours. You said, I actually knew that expression from the document about S21 that is from the book of Us by David Chandler. And I actually translated it into French. So maybe I'm wrong, but this seems to be an example of something that you only knew from having read David Chandler. Is that correct, what I'm saying?
I heard of the saying. I heard it from Brother Kiel before 7 January. Brother Kiel told me at the time that to keep is no gain, to remove is no loss. That's the phrase that I heard from Brother Kiel, and I remember it after I heard that phrase. At that time, someone was arrested, and if there was no concrete evidence showing that the person was a CIA, KGB, or a territory swallowing Yun, and the person did not do thorough work into this matter and just kept thinking about the position, then the person should be removed, because by removal of this person, it means that we do not lose anything. Regarding the excerpt from David Chandler's book, and that the office of the co-prosecutor gave it to me for my comment, I actually read it and I made my comment that the phrase used by David Chandler was not proper, and I made an amendment to that. So the phrase that it's better to arrest 10 innocent people than to release someone who was guilty, or it was something along that line, and I made a denial of that phrase, and then I made an amendment to that phrase, because I told the co-prosecutors that the phrase was not correct, and I already made my amendment in my statement to the review of the book of David Chandler, that is The Voice from age 21. And I actually made a comparison of the actual phrase and the phrase used by David Chandler.
Let me try to give you another example, because maybe this wasn't a good example. This is a very concrete fact, so nothing about a saying. But let me read to you what you said about one certain incident. Mr. President, I'm referring to his WRI E3/1355, English 00242878, Khmer 00239836, and French 00239825. This is a subject that the President already asked you some questions about yesterday or the day before yesterday. And it says, and you say the following: following David Chandler's book, Koitun was stood down on the 8th of April 1976. End of quote. Now I accept you knew that Koitun was under house arrest before he went to S21. But the fact that he was put into house arrest on the 8th of April 1976, is that something you knew then, or is that something you know now because you read Chandler's book?
Before I respond to your question, allow me to clarify the matter. I was at S21 office, and whether I heard about this matter officially through the party's channel or unofficially, it means that I had known this matter before David Chandler knew. Through my recollection, I did not speak about the detention of Koi Truon. The news that Koi Truon was under house detention was before my wife was allowed to go from Long Vai to come and live with me. And that happened in 1976. And Koi Truon was under house detention by the party for a period of about 8 months. So David Chandler's book only gave some date as to the date of the detention. And of course not. I did not learn of the detention from David Chandler's book, because I was the one who was there, not David Chandler. However, maybe I recall to the exact date of the detention in his book.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Witness, but I'm trying to understand how your memory functions. It's a very difficult thing because I cannot look inside of your head, but I'm trying to find out exactly how you construct things. Let me give you yet another example to see if that can somehow help me understanding you. Mr. President, E3/456 I'll be referring to. English ERN 001988882, Khmer 00198873, and French 00198890. It's an interview with the investigators of the co-investigating judges, or the judges themselves actually. And you have prepared 2 charts of the organization. And literally you say the following, and I quote you: I have prepared 2 charts summing up my understanding of the organization. One on the basis of my former knowledge, then on the basis of my current knowledge. So it seems here that you are somehow able to distinguish between those 2 sets of knowledge. Is that correct?
Which charts are you referring to? Please be more specific.
It's not so much about the charts. It's about the phenomenon that you have, on the one hand, knowledge, what we would call contemporaneous knowledge, and the other hand, knowledge that you acquired later. Are you able to distinguish between the 2?
Allow me to speak about the theory of knowledge based on what I studied. It was an incremental approach. It means one day you learn something, next day you learn a little bit more, and it's incremental. And of course, your knowledge is interrelated. First, it was the quantity, and later on, it will narrow down to quality. First, you have to start with theory, and then you do the exercise. Then you return to study theory again, and you return to doing exercise again. So today you learn this exercise, and next day you learn the theory for doing the next exercise. Then your limit will be up to a certain level based on the practice. and you cannot separate the theory and the practice itself.
I'm not giving up on this one, Mr. Witness. Let me give you an example of something that you testified to yesterday. Judge Laverne asked you questions about what your recollection was as to the total number of prisoners. And at one point yesterday you said 10,000 prisoners. You saw a charge containing 10,000 prisoners. But you were also questioned by the military court in Phnom Penh between 1999 and 2002. And let me quote you E3/65, English ERN 00147525, Khmer 00146487, and French 00147900. So you were asked that same question by the judge from the military court. And then you said the following: the number, the question is the number imprisoned and killed at the same time, how many? And the total number detained at S21, how many? Actually, this was a question of the investigating judge here. And then you said the following: let me tell you straight, I do not remember. There are the lists that they kept at S21 which may show that. I do not remember. How many women and children? I do not know. So here, and you did the same thing before the military court. Here, you do not remember anything. But now, in court, yesterday you said there were 10,000 prisoners. Is that something that you are saying now because you've seen the case file? Or is it something that you now remember?
Could you please show me the written record of my interview at the military tribunal? I believe that it exists in Khmer, although I do not have it in my possession. Please show the Khmer version of that statement.
I'm happy to do that. Maybe Monday, just for your information already, Mr. President. The document that I was referring to, the military court, is E3/528, English ERN 00327319, Khmer 00320783, and French 00327324. But let me ask you my question again. That number of 10,000 prisoners, is that something that you now remember, or is that something that you have constructed because you know of a OCP prisoner list which contained 12,000 people?
Judge Laverne asked me a question yesterday, and of course, Your Honor is still here. I responded to his question, and I mentioned a certain number of figure, and everybody knew about it, and also told under which circumstance that I raised the figure, and the number was not actually 10,000. It could be a bit over 10,000, and later on I spoke about the daily number of prisoners a few days before we fled. And I also told Judge Laverne that I did not do the total number of the prisoners on the 3rd of January, but the figure that I myself totaled was a bit over 10,000. As for the co-investigating judges, that is Judge Marcelo Mong and Judge Yu Bun Leng, showed me a list of prisoners at S21 and that I should review it overnight. And next day I was asked about that list, and I said basically the list was correct. However, there were some names missing, including those of my younger brother-in-law as well as of Brother Wong. So the figure was later adjusted a little bit, and it reduced down to 12,200 something or 300, as there were some names that appeared twice. As for my statement at the military tribunal, I cannot recall it. If you may know, it happened since 1999.
Well, 1999 was closer to 1979 than your statement today. But let me move to another subject, and where the same phenomenon is happening. Mr. Witness, this is an important subject. And the President asked you already questions about this before, and that is the date of 15 August 1977. It seems that you are very certain that this is the day that Son Sen left for the battlefield. Correct?
Counsel, first you asked me about a number of prisoners, and you wanted me to say that I knew of the number because of my testimony here. And allow me to say before you that I am not happy with the way you questioned me in relation to your new question. And I apologize, I cannot recall it now. Please repeat it.
You will not like many more questions to come, Mr. Witness, I think. 15 August 1977. You seem to be very certain of that day. That is the day that you said Son Sen left for the battlefield at Nek Lom. Correct?
Regarding 15 August date, not only I was asked by the President of the Chamber, Judge Marcelo Mong also asked me about that particular date, the 15 August. And that he says that I was rather that Son Sen went away. And I told Marcelo Mong that yes, it was on the same date, although the events were separate. And I reiterated the point with the President of the Chamber that there were three main events that occurred on the same 15 August. The first one was 1970, when I left Watana Long Pagoda to Sector 25. Since I no longer had to bear living in the city under the grip of a Lon Nol's regime. So I went to Sector 25, and I had to remember that particular date. Personally, you have to remember certain events that happened to you in your life or throughout your life. And Counsel, what is happening again now? Allow me to finish it first.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Witness, but you're giving testimony that I already heard before. In 1999, before you were arrested, did you know the date of 15 August 1977 then as well?
could you ask me such a question? In what year are you referring to? 15 August 2000 something? That is the day that I was brought to the ECCC? In fact, I was taken to the military tribunal on the 6th of May 1999. As for Mok, he was taken there on the 6th of March 1999. For me, it was on the same 6th, but 6th of May 1999. And of course, I remember that. I even remember the day that Mok died. You want to ask me that date? President witness, please listen to the question carefully, because that's the duty of the defense counsel to confront you with those questions. And you need to understand that, and please be civilized in your response and concentrate on the questions instead. And please respond to the limit within the question. Since there are two main events that you made mention before the military tribunal in 1999, and of course the chamber has heard of your testimony before you were sent to the ECCC, and the question by the defense counsel is in relation to your knowledge, that is contemporary knowledge that you knew at the time, rather than the knowledge that you learned while you are here, while you acquainted with the documents in the case files, as well as during the questioning by parties once you are before the chamber. And that is important for everyone, including the defense counsel, in order to evaluate your evidence. And the chamber also needs to do that as well at the end of the hearing. So please concentrate and respond to the question based on your ability and knowledge. And I understand that there are very difficult dates and events that happened, and I understand that you have been asked hundreds of questions thus far, so it is rather difficult for you as well.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your intervention. Let me come straight to the point. Mr. Witness, if you were so certain about this date, 15 August 1977, why was it that you told Nate Thayer in your interview with him that you were transferred to Nuon Chea in July 1978? I'm happy to give the it's there. I will repeat the question, and let me first give the ends. It is actually a verbatim transcript of that interview, ultimately I think to be published in the Far Eastern Economic Review. It's E3/1567, English ERN 00002622, Khmer 001722.
President Counsel Cobber, please read the identity document number, namely EON number, and the document number again.
Certainly. E3/1567, English ERN 00002623, Khmer 00172211. So my question again, Mr. Witness, if you are so certain about you being transferred to Nuon Chea on the 15th of August 77, how come when you talked to Nate Thayer you used the date July 78?
Thank you, Counsel. I was not given a copy of Ned Tyer's book. Ned Tyer did not to interview me personally. It was Christopher Pessu who interviewed me on that occasion, and Christophe Pessu's book was given to the court here, and the documents, some of the documents is not the real document, are not real documents. I am not confused with the date. The 15th August 1977, it was the date when I went to work with Nguyen Chia. And at the time, Hom Kane, when I was interviewed by Christopher Pessu, Hom Kane was the interpreter. I do not forget that event.
Is it true, the moment that you received the case file, you started changing your testimony as to Sun Sen still reading confessions, first to October, then to 11 November, and finally to the 25th of November, just to fit your date into things that you saw or read in the case file?
What are you asking me? Which date and which document are you quoting? Could you please give it to me and put on my desk?
Well, you said on the 4th of April at 15:17 hours, 2012, that Son Sen last signature could be seen on a confession on the 25th of November 77. Isn't that correct?
Next time, please put the full question, not just partial question. Do not put trivial question. Mr. President, let me clarify the matter. Brother Sun Sen went to the battlefield on 15 August 1977. It is clear to me. But the document which was shown to me here and which I saw was signed by Sun Sen in November 1977, 11 November 1977. There is a document shown to me when I was a witness here, and the document date was dated 25th November 1977. And I made an observation that although Sun Sen had gone to the battlefield, he was still attending the meeting of the permanent committee, and he was one in the meeting of 25th November 1977. I saw his signatures on many documents, and one signature was seen on the 25th of November 1977. And I am sure that Uncle Sun Sen went to the battlefield on 15 August 1977. And although Sun Sen had gone to battlefield, Angka still invited him to meetings. And when he came to the meeting, he would see me to finish off some works at the Sonderbar office. President, thank you, Counsel. It is now time for break. The chamber will take a short break from now until 3 p.m. And the chamber would like to inform the public and parties that the last session of today's hearing will be used for the presentation on a reparation in relation to case 002/02. Thank you, Mr. Kang Gail alias Duit. The hearing of your testimony as a witness has not come to an end yet. You are invited to come and testify once again on Monday, 20th June 2016. That is next week, Monday next week. Security personnel is instructed to bring Kang Gail alias Duit back to the ECC detention facility and return him into the courtroom on Monday,